Hey guys, welcome to our October Battle Academy. We are so excited to have you here with us today. Now, this month's Battle Academy is going to be about engaging our youth leaders. How do we get them? How do we keep them? How do we support them? And we have two very special guests with us this morning. They are Majors Matt and Jamie Satterlee, and they're from NHQ. Now, Major Matt is the National Youth Secretary, and Major Jamie is the National Director for Publications. So thank you for joining us, and we hope that you learned something today. Recording started. I'm so glad this is going to be the beginning.
Right. Hey, Georgia family. So I'm Major Jamie Satterlee, the Director of Publications and Editor of Peer Magazine at the Salvation Army's National Headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia. We absolutely love youth ministry. I have told multiple personnel secretaries that my goal is to be the DYS in every division. And then when I'm done, I can start all over again. Obviously, they don't listen to me, which is how I wound up here. But most recently in youth ministry, we were the divisional youth leaders in Florida for 5 years. And then prior to that, in the fantastic Georgia division for two short years. They were too short. But yeah, we loved our time there in Georgia. It was a great place. I'm not just saying that because you're on here. She's not even paying me, so. But we love the youth and the youth leaders of the Georgia division, and Grandview will always have a special place in our heart.
Hey guys, you remember me from Georgia? If you don't, that's on you. My name is Major Matt Satterlee. I am mostly known for being Melissa Powell's older big brother. I am also the National Youth Secretary. So like Jamie said, we got our start in youth ministry really in the Georgia Division. Georgia Division made us who we are. So that's your fault. So 2 short years in Georgia, 5 years in Florida, and then for the last, well, by this point, nearly 3, we've been here at National Headquarters. So my job as National Youth Secretary is to maintain and make sure all the curriculum that the Salvation Army puts out for our 7 programs, Corps Cadets, Junior Soldiers, all of character building, is just updating it, making sure it's relevant, making sure it's fit theologically for youth ministry, and then also keeping a liaison with Orange Sunday School. Hold your opinions to yourself, or just let those to Melissa Satterlee Powell. And then also maintaining, just keeping up with all the youth ministry that happens across the nation, especially through summer camp. So we have 42 Salvation Army summer camps across the nation. Spectacular mission happens there. If you're at Battle Academy, you're probably at Camp Grandview right now, one of them. And so we just make sure that ministry happens across the nation. We do a lot of other things, but we'll talk about that more later.
Perfect. We are very excited to have you guys. Thank you for joining us today. Now, before we get too far down the road, I have to ask you, I want to know one of the best youth ministry experiences that you've had, maybe as a leader, maybe as a teenager. But then on the flip side, I also wanted to know one of the worst experiences, maybe something that just blew up and did not go the way that you expected it to, or whatnot. So give me the best, give me the worst.
You want to go first this time, Matt?
Well, yeah. Okay. First off, let me say one of the best things that I love right now is that Battle Academy is in Georgia Division is still happening. So Battle Academy was one of those things that we tried to get up and running. And Jamie said, how about we call it Battle Academy? And I was like, no, that's a terrible name. And here it is, like 10 years later, and it's still running as Battle Academy. So one of my favorite stories, the story that I tell all the time about youth ministry, was being a DYS, the camp director in Florida. I always, and when we were in Georgia, I always tried to get on the bus or the van before the bus pulled out of camp and headed back to the Corps to just check in with all the kids and say, man, I hope you had a great time here this summer. You know, we'd love to have you back, that kind of stuff. So one day in Florida, I got on the bus that was about to head out, and I just said, there was this boy, this little 7-year-old boy sitting there on the front row, and I said, hey man, like, listen, we'd love having you. I'd love to have you back. What was your favorite thing about camp? And he didn't really give me an answer, so I had to kind of prompt him. So I was like, how about canoeing and fishing? How was that? And his response was, It's okay. And I was like, all right. So I'm going through my list, right? Like, how was, tabernacle time and dancing and all this stuff? And he was like, it's fine. So I pulled out my ace in the hole, which is always swimming. Every kid loves swimming. Swimming pool is always a winner. So I said, how was swimming? And he goes, it was fine. So at this point, I'm like, bro, like, what's going on? So I said, dude, what was the best thing about camp this week? And he dead-eye looked me in the eyes and said, the best thing about camp this week was I got 3 meals every single day. And all that he cared about was that he knew he was going to get breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day at a Salvation Army camp. We think about a million things about summer camp. We think a million things about our youth ministries that happen around the division. But the fact that this kid knew he was going to eat 3 meals a day, that's why the Salvation Army's there. Because we can't tell kids about Jesus when they're hungry. And the fact that he knew he was going to be in a safe place, get 3 meals a day, man, like, that's my story that I tell all the time now, because we think youth ministry has to be so big, and sometimes it's the small things that really connect the most. Jamie, you want to go ahead and tell your best before we tell the worst?
So there are tons and tons of stories that I could tell, because youth ministry really is our favorite thing. I'll never forget in the Georgia division, I think it was our second youth councils there, so it would have been youth councils 2014. Awakening. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah.
Awakening. We listen, sometimes the way that this works in our youth ministry relationship is Matt has these huge ideas. He's the vision guy. He has these ideas. And then it's like, I'm the one who figures out how to make it happen. Like, what's the details? How is this going to come together? In a planning meeting, Matt said, what if we played dodgeball? I was like, I'm sorry, with 400 people. And he was like, yes. What if we played dodgeball with 400 people? Now, if you were there at this event, you will know that we successfully played dodgeball with 400 people. It did have a spiritual component. It wasn't just like, hey, let us throw balls at kids. Like, that wasn't a thing. There was a reason and a purpose. And at the end, like, it all came together in this grand and glorious way. But that will forever be one of my favorite events, because I do really think that at the beginning, everybody thought we were crazy. And perhaps we were, but it paid off in the way that we wanted it to, and it turned out to be a grand time. So that's one of my favorite memories, I think, is just the insanity of playing dodgeball with 400 people.
I remember being at that youth councils, and when we heard we were playing dodgeball, I think that thought all went through our heads too. Like, do you know how many people we have here? That is not going to happen.
It was a little bit of chaos, but then it was just so good. Yeah,
it was great.
It was so fun. Yeah, it's so much fun. So now the bad side of this is that now when Matt has crazy ideas, I can't just be like, no, he'll like, remember the dodgeball.
You have to keep up with the standard every time. Let's do something bigger.
One of my favorite ones. But I also always think about those summers at camp, when you just have the opportunity to like let kids come away from their lives and just be kids for this week at summer camp. And one of the things that we started doing, I didn't have this idea until we got to Florida, unfortunately, but we started putting up this giant banner right above the stage in the dining room. And every time a child would make a decision, it didn't matter what the decision is, some kind of decision to follow Jesus, whether it was a rededication or the first time that they ever accepted him into their heart, or they just said, I realized this week that I need to work on, whatever in my life. We had, depending on what the theme for the summer was, it always matched the theme, some kind of little thing that their name would go on, and it would go up on this panel, this big giant thing hanging over the stage. And so as the summer went on, the board filled up, and you could see all these kids whose lives were being changed. And it helped keep, at the forefront of the mind for our staff. This is why we're here. It helped me on days when you're just exhausted and tired, and you're like, ugh, I'm so tired. To remember, this is why we're here. This is why we do this, for, whatever the little symbol is and the child's name that's on there. This is why we do what we do, why we exhaust ourselves in the summer, because it gives us a chance to change a life. So those are the memories I think that all hold close.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what are some of those bad stories, right? The ones that are cringeworthy that maybe we still think of and try to
The
do better.
the one that
Oh,
the
go
one
ahead.
that I'm always going to think about as getting away. The one that got away was, again, I know I don't mean to tell summer camp stories, but like it's been said, 1 week of youth ministry at camp is worth an entire year of youth ministry in the local Corps, because it's just that intense. So, but there was a kid in Florida that was, 13, 14 years old, just one of these kids that it was just, he was getting to be a danger to himself and to others. And so it was a messy situation, and we had to send him home from camp. He refused to get in the car to go back home because he knew what was waiting for him when he got home. And it broke, we talked, it was hours to get him to finally get in the car. So he gets in the car to go home. And as his leader's taking him home, we hear this, his leader's telling us the story the next day. She went to 3 or 4 houses, and every single family member that opened the door, when they saw that it was this boy, they said no, and they closed the door back in his face. So it took about till like midnight, 2 in the morning before the leader could finally find a place for him to lay. And so, it just broke my heart. And I've always been praying for him and all that stuff. Well, fast forward just to last year, maybe just it was this year, maybe it was a couple of months ago. We got the news headline that this boy was actually, he was in the park late at night, him and another friend, and they were arguing over a girl. And so he's 16 at this point, and by this point, the other friend pulled out a gun at the park and shot him, and he died. He's murdered over an argument in a park late at night over a girl. And I remember the kid's name. I'm not going to say it here, but he will always be, in some ways, the one that got away. That I think about the kids that are troubled, the ones that we sometimes have to send home, and we do. It was the right decision at the end of the. But it's just those things that haunt you, because like when you do youth ministry, people think this is not a game. It's not a game.
Just an hour of fun on a Wednesday night. Like, these are real lives.
Yeah,
real lives.
These are real souls. So he will always be the one that I think of saying, could I have done more? So
I think that's the unfortunate reality. I would say it's the same thing for me. Is unfortunately, I can, even prior to being divisional youth leaders, when I think about our core appointments, and that we had large youth groups in each of our core appointments, and I can think of a kid in every appointment where you just try so hard. You could see the potential. You have the foresight, the life experience to know what's coming down the road if you can't find a way to help them break the cycles. And unfortunately, I can name one in every appointment where it just didn't end up well. It didn't go well. But I think that those things, they're heartbreaking, but they're also, I think, for me, a motivator to keep going, and to say, like, we can't afford to just let our kids end up in these horrible situations. So we have to do everything we can. Are we going to be able to succeed in every case? No. My experience says you can't. But that doesn't mean that we don't try. We don't give up. We don't say, well, we can't win them all, so we're just not going to put in the effort. No, we fight like crazy, in hopes that, we can break that cycle.
Yeah. I think all of that kind of speaks to this idea of making sure that we have youth leaders and good youth leaders that can kind of speak into those kids' lives and be, another adult that will speak into their life and encourage them and pray for them and help them and, do whatever it is that they need to do. And so that's one of the things really that we want to talk about today is our youth leaders, right? Like how do we get youth leaders? How do we keep youth leaders? How do we support them in the jobs that they do? Most of them, I know, in the Army are volunteer, and so like how do we do all of that? That's what we want to spend the rest of our time with here today. And not just saying all of these things, but how do we practically do that, right? That something is the things that we give are going to actually be helpful to the Corps, right? That they can take, they can use, they can do. So with all of that said, what or who, maybe both, who and what makes a good youth leader? Like, what characteristics do you look for when you look for a good youth leader?
So let me say right off the bat, and I'll let Matt jump in, but I just want to say at the beginning, we understand, please don't, when we're going through these things and giving, our thoughts and all that stuff, please don't think that we don't understand how very difficult it is to recruit youth leaders. In our first appointment, we had about 40 kids, Matt, 40 teenagers. And there were many weeks where it was me and Matt. And sometimes at one point we had an assistant officer. We did have some key locals who were there every chance they could be, but there were some weeks when it was me and Matt. And so we understand what it is, how hard it is, and that sometimes this advice that we're going to give may not translate, or it may be easy to think, well, I just don't have those resources at hand. Please don't think that we don't see you. We do. We understand. So we're going to just kind of share what, from our experience, what has helped. And on that same note, though, always feel free. We understand, there's chains of command, all that kind of stuff. I probably shouldn't say on a recorded thing. We don't care about that. All I'm saying is we would love for you to reach out to us and say, hey, here's my situation. Could you help me think through this? We always want to do everything that we can to help resource the field. So I would say for me, like the number one thing that I want a youth leader to know is that the most important thing that you can do in the life of a young person is to be there for them. Like there are tons of training, and we'll talk about trainings and stuff like that in a little while. I don't know what just happened to your computer, Matt. You disappeared. There you go. But the most important thing, I think, is just to be there. When I think about the youth leaders that made a big difference in my life, there are many of them who weren't even the leaders of the youth group that I was in. It was just people in the Corps who cared about me. I think about somebody like Major Jeanette Tritton, who, when I was when my parents were stationed at her Corps, she was probably in her 80s. She was ancient, lovely, but she was the preschool Sunday school teacher. That was her local officer role. Was she taught the 3 and 4 year olds, which God bless her. I don't know how she chased after those little kids all the time, but she made such a huge impact in my life. Again, she was not my youth leader. I was probably 16, 17 at the time. She was not, in charge of any of the programs I was at, but she took the time every time I saw her to stop and to talk to me about what was going on at school, what was going in my life, how, she knew Matt. How's Matt? What are you talking about? What are you going to be doing in college? What is, just all these things. What are you wrestling with right now? And when I think about youth leaders who made, or just leaders in the church who made an impact on me, she's the first person that comes to mind because she just cared. I knew that she really cared about what was happening, with me and with my life. And so I think that's the number one thing is, if you're going to be a youth leader, if you don't actually care, don't agree to do this. I mean, you have to, kids can smell fake from a mile away. They know if you don't want to be there. They know if you're not really interested, or don't really believe the things that you're saying to them. And so I would say that that's like the number one most important thing, is that you just have to care, actually care about that particular child.
That's good.
Good. All of these questions that we're answering are all podcasts in themselves. I mean, you can read 1,000 books and listen to 1,000 other podcasts on these things. But what makes a good youth leader is, well, first off, no matter who you are, if you're a disciple of Jesus, if you follow Jesus, then you are a youth leader. You are called and commissioned by him. He told it in his Great Commission. His last words to us before he left was, go and make disciples. And if that means people younger than you, then congratulations. Boom, boom, boom. You are now sanctified to go you're now commissioned to be a youth leader. And your core Judges, the book Judges chapter 2, verse 10 is a verse that should haunt every single Christian all the time. It says this: after that whole generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation grew up who neither knew God nor what he has done for Israel. And that is what we are called to war against, is to make sure that the generation who's coming up behind us knows the Lord and knows what he has done for Israel, knows what he has done for the church, knows what he has done for the Salvation Army. So what makes the hallmarks of a good youth leader? Are you breathing? Do you have a pulse? Right? That's step one. Number two, you have to, like Major Jamie said about Colonel Jeanette Trenton, you just have to be willing to build a relationship with kids. Here's my thing. Do you know their names? You should know the names of every single kid in your corps. Do not call him red shirt because he always wears red shirt. Do not, you should know the names of every single kid in your corps. It doesn't matter if you're a youth leader or not. Know their names. Number two, know something about them. What grade are they in? What do they like to do? What's their favorite sports team? And then third, you need to high five every single kid, every single meeting. Before they leave that room, that kid gets a hi, your name, how's this, and a high five every single time. Don't call them your name. That's where you say their name. All right. Because if you're saying hi, your name, that's a problem.
Hey,
so
sports.
That's you as corps officers and as corps leaders. If you see people in your corps who can do these three things well, know their name, know something about them, and give each kid a high five before they leave the building every single time, that's the recruiting ground for good youth leaders.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of other things that we could talk about, like, planning skills and all those kind of things. But what we've learned is you can teach for skill. You can't teach for heart and for caring. So those are the people, like, who in the corps do you know that's compassionate, who really seems interested in the lives of other people? Then you can train them to be youth leaders, to do a program, right? You can teach somebody how to do a program. It's hard to teach people how to care. And so those are things like foundational things. Obviously, there are things that we could talk about, like they need to be safe from harm certified.
Yeah.
You need to know.
That goes without saying on every single thing we're saying. You
need to have known this person for longer than an hour before you put them in charge of you. Listen, you are laughing right now, but we hear stories of people who are like, hi, this is my first time here. And they're like, great, our nursery teacher didn't show up. Would you like to sit with the children? Please don't do that. There is a lot of training that needs to take place. But really the crux of what I'm saying is you can train for program. You have great divisional youth department who can help you train to program and train on some of these other things. But you can't train. It's really hard to train a heart in somebody. Obviously, Jesus can make that happen, and we would be praying that for all of our corps members. But it's easier to train for program skills if you can find somebody who just already has a heart for people and a heart for discipleship.
Studies have shown that if a youth in your corps has at least 5 adults, 5 anchor points somewhere in their life, and all this means is 5 people who know their name and who ask about them, they're like 60, 70, 80% more likely to stay in the faith for life because they knew that people knew them, saw them at the corps. So it's not just the corps youth leader, it's not the YPSM, it's not just the corps officer's job. Every single person in the corps needs to know every single kid's name. They need 5 points, 5 anchor points. That's it.
Yeah, I love this whole conversation because I think a lot of times we think that, our youth leaders need to be young and cool and like your skinny jean wearing, your middle part, whatever. Like we need to have these hip, cool people working with our kids. But I mean, just like you said, Major Jamie, like having Colonel Trenton, right? I mean, she was not young by any stretch of the imagination.
She did not wear skinny jeans.
But I mean, she changed your life, right? Like she was able to speak into your life and really change that. And so don't look for just the young people in your corps, your young adults or whoever that can kind of step up to take that. But I mean, even your older adults in your corps can also help. So
it's a ready excuse, and I'll say it, and I'm trying to say it in love, but it's a ready-made excuse for people to say, I am not relevant enough. I don't understand these things. But what kids need is they don't need more friends. They need they need leadership and they need wisdom. And that comes from experience. You need your 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old people. We had a YPSM in the Corps in Florida that was in her late 80s, and she was still the YPSM, and she could still outrun me if she wanted to.
Camp for 2 weeks in summer. Because she
So-
doesn't the kids that much.
So when they say age ain't nothing but a number, it's right. Okay.
And some of I will say, from the divisional youth leader side, some of the best BFIs, I don't even know if BFIs are still a thing. We've been gone so long, but some of the best BFIs.
CMAs.
Oh, okay. Well, some of the best of those that we ever had were older. I say older, they weren't like nursing home age, but they were, older adults, late 40s, early 50s, because like Matt said, they had experience and they could, they still knew how to have fun with the kids. We're not saying like hire some stodgy person or whatever, but they still knew how to have fun with the kids, but they could offer the life experience and be able to kind of guide them, in the way. That's the thing, like kids they don't always want an easy answer or for you just to tell them. They want somebody who's going to talk things through with them and listen to what they have to say, and just care enough to hear their troubles and just, talk to them about it. And that can be done by a person of any age.
Yeah. So I know I said this already, but I love this whole conversation about especially like the ages of leaders. But kind of on the flip side of that, I know one of the ways that we can kind of help get leaders in our Corps is to raise up our kids, right? The kids that are maybe in our ministries now, when they start to get to that age where they can help, maybe we are developing the leadership within our own kids. And I love that the territory has also come out with this RAISE initiative that they have, and part of that is leadership development. So I guess my question for you then is, how do we raise, to use that word, how do we raise leaders in our Corps? Yeah, hashtag raise, that's right. How do we do that, practically speaking? What are some good tips and tricks maybe for raising leaders in our own Corps?
Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, so he's pointing to me because this is my soapbox. I think that we do our young people a grave disservice when we pretend like there's some kind of line in the sand, and when you get to this line, then you can become a leader, but you can't get there until that's a non-existent line, right? That's a line that we put into place that does not have to be there. Our kids can do all kinds of ministry, right? We're the ones that limit them and sell them short. Look around, what is it that you need done in your Corps? All right, you need somebody to straighten the chairs on Sunday morning? Ask your young people to pitch in with that. The statistics show that young adults are less likely to leave the church when they are tied into mission. And so we want to tie young adults into mission. The best place to start is when they're in our youth programs, to help let them see that, it's not just about, well, come play a game on Wednesday night. How can we tie them into the other things that are being done around the Corps? Feeding ministries, putting together kits for the homeless, visiting nursing homes. Nursing homes love children. All right. So if you have to, obviously some of them have standards and rules you have to meet. So you got to abide by all those things, but pretty much it's not every single thing, but there are many, many things that are going on in your Corps that young people can have a part in. The Corps Cadet program has great opportunities and great leadership development tools to make this happen. That's what the L in the bold Corps Cadet stands for, leadership development. So there are ways to train them for pulpit ministry, but also for, all kinds of core work. Community service is all right there in Corps Cadets. And I think, to me, it makes no sense that we go through a 5-year program of leadership development and we're like, let us teach you how to be leaders, but then it's like, oh, then we do nothing. One of the things that we did in Florida was when a person graduated Corps Cadets, when they got their graduate Corps Cadet certificate, they got a local officer commission. And so that might be something as simple as like assistant welcome sergeant. It doesn't have to be, we're not saying take this 13-year-old and make them your YPSM. We're not saying that, but there are a lot of things and ways that they can be engaged. This is where it helps for you to know your kids. What are their skills? What are their interests? What are their passions? What do they love to do? You can't tell me that your core doesn't need help on the AV team or the social media monitoring or all those kind of things. Again, I'm not saying hand all your social media over to your 14-year-old, but I'm saying that they know way more techie stuff than most of us do. So let them help, let them use those skills, and put them to use. I'll also say that one of the great things about Gen Z, which is this generation that we're talking about, all of the, pretty much everybody who's involved in a youth program now would be part of Gen Z, except for maybe the kindergartners. But Gen Z loves to mobilize for a cause. They know how to get behind something and push it forward. So all we're doing is restraining ourselves when we don't allow them to take part in mission.
That's good.
Yeah, I would just add on to that. Just point them to the mission. We already have the mission. We have the mission statement. The Southern Territory has a mission. We already have a mission. And listen, we are better suited than the rest of the Christian church for this because it's already built into the Salvation Army. Food pantries, shelters, the family stores, disaster. We already have, like other churches have to build the foundation before they can do these things. And we've already got it ready made. So like give the youth of your core the mission. Say, hey, there are people that are out there tonight that are going to bed hungry. How are we going to fix that? But what we like to do is say, you come to the core and you pack little food boxes for us and we'll count it as core cadet points. Cool. That's your mission that you're asking them to come alongside. Tell them there are hungry people going to bed tonight without food. What are we going to do about it? And let them tell you what they want to do about it. So Gen Z they are creators, not consumers. They want to create things, not consume them. Sitting down and having people say, this is what you're going to do doesn't work anymore. So let your kids create. And if they want to create a new way to fulfill the mission of the Salvation Army, hallelujah, let's go and get it done. At the very least, being creators, you could tell one of your kid, hey, make the Sunday morning program cover. These kids can do things on the computer quickly than you could, and you don't have to use Dayspring or whatever it is, anymore for the cover. Shout out to Dayspring, not a sponsor, but let your kids create. Stop being the one to create for them and let them consume. They want to create. Let them go. Take the chains off and let them go with a watchful eye. Because dadgum, what we also have to do is we got to make sure that the theology and the doctrine is correct. Right. And that comes through your teaching, your faith, your prayers, your doing these things.
Right. They need guidance for sure, but they are capable of thinking things through and of helping, brainstorming and creating. Just give them, they just need the opportunity. They just need somebody to help them. And by doing that, you're building life skills into them and helping to guide them again in the direction that, that we need them to go.
I think all of that falls under this developing leaders, right? We're not just making them leaders by letting them have the go-to to just go do it, go do this, go do that. But you're developing a leader. You're teaching them now, this was good, but how can we make it better? How can we do this a little more organized next time? Or, how do we make this a little more theologically sound? We're speaking into them. We're walking with them as they do it. So
the last thing we need is more managers, right? Then that's when we hand them something and say, okay, now do this. We're just teaching them to manage. We don't need more managers. We need leaders who can look at a problem and say, okay, here's the issue. How can we address it in a way that's, relevant and doctrinally correct and, all those kind of things. But by allowing kids to be a part of that early, you're building that leadership into them, not management.
Yeah. Good. Excellent. So once you identify a good youth leader, whether they be 16, working them up, or lower than that, or if they're 80, whatever that looks like, what do they need to know to be ready to be a youth leader? Practically, how do we train them to be good youth leaders?
I would say first off, just for me again, I love doing things in threes, so I'm going to say it in threes. One, everybody needs to be safe from harm trained. That's a non-negotiable in this day and age. And I know it's very easy to complain. It's very easy to say, I hate this. Listen, we all hate it, but it's there because it keeps a child safe and it keeps the leader safe, you safe. So if anybody wants to be a leader in the Salvation Army, they've got to do safe from harm. That's a non-negotiable. That's the first step. Number two, you need to have at least be into the word yourself. You need to be doing the spiritual disciplines yourself. This also prevents burnout, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later. If you are not spending time in the word, you can't give away what you don't have. So you yourself need to be in the word every single day. And if you're not, you're hurting yourself and you're hurting your people. And then two, with that is also spending time talking to the Lord in prayer each day, right? Take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, set a timer on your phone, get somewhere in your house or your office and just talk to the Lord for 10 minutes. And then my last thing is, and this is a huge shout out to Netflix, not a sponsor, but I think that it's my opinion that every single youth worker in the country should watch Netflix's documentary called The Social Dilemma. We watched it a couple of years ago when it came out, and I just think it should be required viewing now for every youth leader in the world to see how social media, how it affects Gen Z, what's going on in that, because that's the world now. So that might not be a practical thing for people to do, but I think in some form or fashion, you need to have one hand in the word and one hand in the culture, knowing what's going on. Jamie.
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of things that you can do to train the youth leader. The first thing I would say is to be aware that training is not a one and done. All right. It's not just like, okay, I'm going to give you an hour training on how to do Corps Cadets and then be done. There needs to be regular touch points. Touch points is something probably you shouldn't say in youth ministry. Connection points where you're connecting, with them, having, refreshers, whether that's quarterly or monthly, however you want to do it, but just, reevaluate, like taking the time to evaluate and see like, okay, where could we use a little bit more help? Where can we use a little bit more focus? I would say take advantage of every resource that you have. I can't tell you how many times we go to Salvation Army things and they're like, I need something for this. And I say, well, have you tried, oh, I didn't know that ever existed. If you go to, Matt, you want to give
Salvation Army Youth, salvationarmyyouth.org.
SalvationArmyYouth.org has every Salvation Army curriculum that we have access to is on that website. And then all of the training tools that we have that go along with it are also there. I would say don't be afraid to utilize outside resources. There's a great resource, I believe, put out by Grow, and it teaches you how to plan an entire year of youth ministry, right? So they give you every step. Here's the questions we should ask ourselves: how to engage parents, and so it literally walks you through how to plan a year of youth ministry. So making sure that that you're taking the time to look at things like that. I would also say that when you're training youth leaders, one of the best ways that you can support them is for you yourself to have a plan and to teach them how to have a plan. This is where we get into trouble in youth ministry. We're like, oh, it's, at the end of the day, I forgot that I'm in charge of the lesson tonight, so we're going to do paper airplanes, which paper airplanes are great. And sometimes, that's what you got to do. But when you have an overstimulated kid that you got to keep entertained or, busy for an hour, paper airplane is only going to last you so much. So if you've ever sat in any of my trainings, the thing that I always say is, have a plan, work the plan. That's what's going to keep you really in the best, getting the most out of your time together with that group is if you have a plan and you're working. One of the things I always say is, where do you want to end up? If I'm at the start of the year, and what do I want my kids to know at the end of the year, at the end of their program with me, when they, graduate? What are the things I want them to know? Well, they're not just going to, chances are they're not just going to figure those things out. I need to be putting the steps in place that help them to get to attaining that knowledge, right? So if I know that by the time this year ends, I want them to have completed the, I don't know, electrician badge or whatever. Is that a badge? It's not called.
I hope not.
I don't know.
It's not called the electrician badge.
Add that in. NHQ, add that in.
Listen,
Hard
we
pass.
could tell
Hard
you
pass.
some stories. So if I know, like, my goal is I need them to earn this many badges, well, what are the steps I need to do but to put that into place by the end of the year? Okay, well, I know that if by the time they graduate junior soldiers, I need them to have these skills to become a corps cadet. What can I do in this year to build those skills into them? Okay, well, then take it further. If by the time they graduate, I need them to know that their identity should be found only in Christ. That who I am matters. Those are the things that then how can I build, how can I plan events that help get these messages into them? So having a plan, working the plan, know where you're going will help you know where to start. Listen, I could give you 100 more. We did a podcast on this, so you could always just go listen to our podcast.
We're going to hit that up at the end. Don't worry. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to let you plug it and do all the things at the end. So just plug it in right there. So we have youth leaders now, right? We have good youth leaders, a variety of ages. They are trained, they are set, they are ready to go. Now, what can we do maybe as corps officers or maybe leadership staff? Like, what can we do to support our youth leaders and give them the help that they need maybe throughout the year?
Your job is to be praying for them. And constantly checking on them. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And your second thing is to do all you can to provide them what they need to do the ministry, to do the mission. So how do you support them? If they need crayons, as you say, whatever, you get that so that they have what they need when they show up ready to go. So, and then the other thing, I would say back to checking in, just as we said earlier, like building relationship with the youth, knowing their name, knowing something about them, giving them a high five. As corps officers, as leaders over youth leaders, you should know your youth leaders' names, what they're going through, what's going on in their life, regular checking in, and your youth leaders need a high five too. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily, but it mostly means people need to hear words of affirmation. You're doing a good job. This is tell the stories, tell the wins, the victories of how Jesus has been working through your youth ministry. And don't just, one of our downsides is we say, oh, cool, you're going to do this for me now. Great. We hand it to them and then we walk away and we check in once a year and we say, hey, here's a, Hershey's bar. We're Hershey, so glad to see you. I could have done that better. But like gifts are all well and good, but there's something about a daily, week, month, more than annual checkup that is just saying, how you doing? What can I do? Check in on your people.
I think we have to remember too that unfortunately, just because of some of the,
if there's any DHQ officers in the room, check in on your officers. Check in on your officers. Words of affirmation. You should know their name. You should know something about them. You should give them a high five.
And
not a sponsor.
So I think that obviously, it's hard, especially when you're in a small corps and like maybe that one sweet lady, she's your only youth volunteer. And so it's tempting, and sometimes we feel like we have to do this where we're just like, okay, well, you can just be in charge of everything. Which the thing is, like, we have to remember, Matt said this a minute ago, you can't give what you don't have. So we need to make sure that our leaders are having opportunities to be fed themselves. That might mean that if you have a leader who's responsible for multiple activities on a weeknight, that they maybe shouldn't be in charge of an activity that takes place during church because they need to be hearing the word too, right? Or if it's your junior soldier or junior church leader and they're not able to be in the meeting, then maybe we don't put them in charge of something that meets at the same time as Bible study midweek so that they can have that time to be fed. Again, we want the people who are being disciplers to also be being discipled. And so we need to make sure that we're not so busy, making them in charge of all these discipleship things that they don't also have time to be discipled themselves. Maybe that means a financial support where, just because of whatever's happening at your corps, if they can't be involved in that, you're helping them, like you're paying a conference fee so that they can go to, I don't know, there used to be this thing called Women of Faith. I don't know if that's still a thing. when they come to your core, or helping them get connected to a local Bible study fellowship group. What can we do? These leaders are pouring so much of their lives into our programs. What can we do to help support their spiritual growth? So I think it's keeping some of those things in mind. Again, they can't give what they don't have. So how are they being fed? That's something that we have to be mindful of ourselves as officers and leaders. If we're in charge of everything, how are we being fed? There are appointments where I went and joined outside Bible studies where I could just be Jamie so that I could, get the word, because I was so busy doing all these other things during program nights. I didn't have time to sit necessarily in Bible study, or you're doing whatever during church, or you're the one preaching. So learning how to engage in those outside things, I think, can also be helpful to us. I would also say, well, I'll save this for the next question. Just kidding.
Don't get ahead. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I just being a youth leader in the Corps, like hearing all the things that you're saying, like it's completely true. And I am grateful to be in the Corps that I am, because I think that we do get that support. We do get, that weekly check-in, and like all of the supplies are there when we have it. We walk in and our Corps officer is usually there to say, like, do you need anything? Are you good? How's it going? Are you doing okay? And I mean, that speaks volumes just as a volunteer, knowing that you have someone checking in on you throughout the week. It's good for us, just as good as it is for our kids to be checked in, right? Like every week, every Wednesday, it's good for us as leaders to also have that. So we know, I mean, no amount of support sometimes, well, maybe, I don't know, can necessarily prevent burnout, right? We know that burnout is real, and it's terrible when it happens. So I guess my question then is how do we prevent burnout from happening? I mean, is it possible to avoid burnout? How do we do that? And then I guess also, if a leader is burnt out, how do we get them back? Is that possible? How do we help?
Go ahead, and Jamie, you finish your thought.
Yeah, so I will say it's a lot easier to prevent burnout than it is to bring somebody back from burnout. So your best bang for your buck, or best way to invest, is to do everything you can to avoid for them getting to that space. Now, sometimes that might mean giving them a break. You say for this spring quarter or whatever, we're not going to put you as the leader. You can just have an assistant role, like where, I don't know, you put out the paper plates or whatever for dinner, so that you can have some rest and refreshment. We have this unfortunate tendency to think that we can just do it all and keep going. And it's not true. Everybody, listen, Jesus went away and took times of refreshment. So if Jesus went away and took times of refreshment, I don't know why we think we don't need to do it. It doesn't make any sense to me. But making sure that our leaders have some time of refreshment. Now, I will say, I think one of the most important things that we can teach our people, and this could be done very easily at a leadership retreat or some leadership training before programs start for the year. I've been learning a lot lately through my own schooling kind of stuff about a rhythm of life. And these are like, what are things that I'm going to do daily, weekly, monthly to help make sure that I'm staying in a healthy place. Some of those things include the spiritual disciplines. Some of them include just things that are personal to me. For me, one of the best ways that I get refreshment is being outside, being a part of nature. It's how I connect with God. And so as part of my rhythm of life, I know that I need at regular intervals to be getting outside time. So teaching your people about this thing called a rhythm of life. Matt can talk a little bit more about balance and how that's kind of a false thing that we've embraced. But I think getting our people to understand what a rhythm looks like and then helping them abide by that rhythm. That's one of those things that you can check in about if you're developing these things together and sharing them with one another, accountability with each other as people who are being discipled and are discipling. Then knowing what their rhythms are and asking about how those things are going goes a long way in helping people avoid burnout. Matt, do you want to talk a bit about balance and rhythm?
Yeah, I think we use the phrase balance of life ridiculously. Like, stand on one foot and just keep your balance. You're going to be wobbling back and forth, right? Like between work and home and other thousand other things. It's a rhythm. It's steps, right? Imagine a line on the ground. Your left foot goes on the left side of the line. Your right foot goes on the right side of the line. When you are at work, when you are doing the ministry, when you are in class, you are in class. You're not on your phone. You're not looking up on Facebook or whatever for game ideas while you're teaching your class. You've prepared, you're done. And while you're stepping in there, you're in it. When you go home, you're at home. You got to put the work aside and you're at home. So my answers to this are generalities because like there's no, like Jamie said, once you get to a point of burnout, it's almost impossible to get somebody back. It would take just a complete, they have to walk away for months before they can come back to that. Or years in some cases. But I would say, so generally some of the things are, my answers are the same as before. Are you doing the spiritual disciplines? Are you reading your Bible and talking to the Lord every day? If not, you're not putting gas in your car. That's the simplest way. Prayer in Bible study is the fuel for ministry. And if you're not doing that, I'm too busy. You're gonna burn yourself out. I've got nothing but frustration when people say, I don't have time to do that. Then you don't have time to do this ministry. You don't have time to be in ministry. So that's 1. 2, check in. Are you checking in with your people? You need to be checking in with people. Other people need to be checking in on you. And lastly, you need to replace yourself. Like that's what you should be working towards. As youth leaders, you should be replacing yourself. We get so caught up sometimes in our self-importance to say, I'm a leader. If it's not for me, this doesn't go. How dare you have that mentality, right? Because we need to be replacing ourselves so that one day we won't be here. Judges chapter 2, verse 10, another generation arose that did not know the Lord and did not know what the Lord had done for Israel. We need to be bringing up the generation. We're not going to be here forever. Officers, youth leaders, YPSM, Sunday school teachers. And as you build leadership into that generation behind you, you can take those Sundays where you need to just not be there. And there's somebody there to take over in your ministry and these things. So, yeah, get a little passionate about that and send all your horrible emails to melissa.powell@uss.salvation.
Yikes. I will forward them on up the chain.
Chief.
Yeah, that's right. I think that those are good tips. Like when you're home, be home. When you're at work, be at work. When you're in class, be in class. Have a good rhythm to your life. Not a balance.
There are great resources out there, lots of great books. Ruth Haley Barton has some good stuff on rhythm of life. Ken Shigematsu has some good stuff about rhythm of life. A side plug, if you read the January edition of the War Cry, Ken Shigematsu, who has written books about rhythm of life, has submitted an article about how to live life in a rhythm. So check that out.
I like
that. She's saying January 2023. You got to wait.
Yes, you do. January 2023.
It's coming.
Just in time for your New Year's. Like instead of teaching your people about resolutions, teaching them about rhythm.
That's good. That's good. So just one last thing really that I just want to, maybe just a couple more things, not one. One of the things that I love is that Major Matt, you send out to, is it some of our territorial leaders? Is that who it is? A Friday report, right? Every week you send this out. Most weeks, I should say. There are some weeks that things get busy, but I love that at the very end of your email. What do you say at the end of your email every week? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, the last thing I send this email out as often as I can to youth leaders all over the country. And I always say the same closing paragraph. Youth ministry is a long game. Those looking for easy wins and quick victory should be looking somewhere else. You may not see any spiritual fruit from the work that you're doing today. But let me tell you, the work that you're doing is bearing fruit, but it may bear fruit it will bear fruit in the next 10, 15, or 20 years from now. The work you're doing today will be seen in the moms and dads, husbands and wives, men and women, soldiers and officers they become tomorrow. So just because it looks like you're not doing anything and nothing's changing, don't be fooled by that. Don't let the enemy whisper in your ear that everything you're doing is meaningless, because the work you're doing today is going underground, the thing beneath the thing, and it will bear spiritual fruit in the next 10, 15, or 20 years.
That's good. I think that's a good encouragement just to the youth leaders around the division to keep chugging ahead, right? To keep going, put your head down, do the work, invest in your kids, because it will pay off. Even if you don't see it now, it will pay off one day, right?
We gotta have a long view of ministry. We measure our stuff in yearly battle plans and stuff like this, and it's all well and good, but we gotta think past who is going to be at this core in the next 20 years.
Right. Good. Well, I just want to say thank you to the both of you. Thanks for chatting with me a little bit today. Thanks for taking some time out of your very busy schedule at NHQ to sit down and chat with your sister-in-law. Thank you. I do want to give you an opportunity, though, here at the end to plug your podcast. If you want to talk about that, let everybody know how to listen to it, what it is, all the good stuff.
Yeah, we do through peermag.org. We have a podcast called The Battle Line. It's that place where faith and the culture collide. And so on there, we have about 45 episodes right now. We try to put one up at least once every 2 weeks, at least once a month at least. But we try to highlight those little known Salvation Army programs, youth programs that are out there. Not only that, we talk about what's going on in the culture and ways to enhance your youth ministry. But like the last one we did was Boys and Girls Clubs, because Boys and Girls Clubs are not very big in the other territories. They're huge in the South. But like, I would encourage everybody in Georgia to look up the Revolution Hawaii project. What are some other things out there, Jamie? That
SA Gaming.
Yeah, SA Gaming is huge. The Others Project. There are 1,000 youth ministries. Again, Jamie mentioned this halfway ago. There are 1,000 youth ministries out there that nobody even has ever heard of. So check out the podcast, listen to these things and get some ideas, and then take them back.
Yeah, and like Matt said earlier, SalvationArmyYouth.org. We used to have separate websites for everything. And if you go to juniorsoldiers.com, it'll just redirect you over there. But we used to have separate websites for everything. And we're like, well, for this, go here. For that, go to the toolkit. If you go to that website, all Salvation Army curriculum that's done in the United States is housed there. So you can find everything you need on that website.
And we also tag into the other territories, the other U.S. territories, so you can get to their stuff as well. And then as we go along, we're beginning to add other international territories, so you can click in and see Australia's youth website, because Australia does these, man, talk about like Kids Alive and these there's some pretty amazing stuff coming out of other international territories.
Yep. So then I would also say, check out Peer Magazine. You get it at your core every month, but you can also go to peermag.org. Hey, look at that. So, yes. So there are lots of great things in here. Again, we do a lot of studying on Gen Z, and this magazine is geared straight towards Gen Z. What are the things that are affecting them? What are the things, Matt? What are the the topics that they need, to know about? And the things that really need to be addressing. And that's part of, like the podcast, our mission is to ignite faith conversations around faith and community and culture. And so there's lots of great resources in there. What I always say to youth leaders is two things. One, Matt, you're distracting me.
Keep going. I'm almost done with the magazine. Keep going.
So one of the things I say, the best way that you can get this kind of material into your kids' hands is not just to hand it to them, because then they just set it down. But if you like read about it and you say like, oh, so we were just talking about rhythm. One of the things that's in here that probably benefit your youth leaders too. This is the September issue. It's soul rest, and about like, why is it necessary? Why does God command us to rest? Why is rest important? But if you read something in here and it's something that one of your kids has been wrestling with, then the best thing that you can do is to put a safety pin, a paper clip in this and say, hey, I read this article and I thought about that conversation we had. Why don't you read it and let's talk about it together? That's discipleship, right? These things go right hand in hand with that. One of the cool things that we put into place, it's been about a year ago now, is that the back cover, I'm not going to do this because every time I have one of these meetings, I do this, and now I just have a bunch of backlist magazines laying around my office. But this back page of the cover is made to be torn out, and it's scripture that can just be posted on the bulletin board at your core. It can go in their lockers, be taped to their bathroom mirrors. This is just a visual representation of getting the word in their heart, and it always corresponds with the Bible study that's found in the magazine. So that's another discipleship tool that we've tried to help make both relevant and helpful to you.
Last thing, where can we find you on social media?
For youth leaders, I'll just talk about Peer. The War Cry is also on all the social medias, but Peer Mag or Peer.magazine. If you go to all the social media, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We have a presence on TikTok. Yeah, you can find Peer.magazine pretty much all of those places.
Yeah, and for us, it's SalvationArmyYouth.org, which is the biggest website. And you can also find us on the socials at nhq.ced, 6 random letters of the alphabet, on Facebook and Instagram.
nhq.ced and Peer Mag. All right. Thank you, guys.
Georgia, keep being awesome.
We love you.
Yeah, you made us what we are. Again, it's your fault.
Go win some kids for Jesus.